Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell, and it is Thursday, April 19th, in the year of the apocalypse 2012. And a comment today on a very interesting article that appeared in the Daily Bell once again for April 9th of this year. And the article is entitled, I'm going to put it on the website, link it, so that if you watch this video news blog, you can link to the article and see the quotations that I'm referring to. The article is entitled Lincoln, meaning President Abraham Lincoln, must have worked for the money power. All right. And I chose this article because I think it's kind of interesting to watch how not necessarily the elite media works, but sometimes how the alternative media works. All right. And I'm going to read the article. I have to adjust my glasses. There are certain things in this article I want to point out, and I'm going to read them to you and then comment on them. The first is toward the end of the article. I'm going to take the article in reverse order. I'm going to use the last part first and then go to their conclusions, which appears in the first part of the article. All right. The article states the Lincoln portrayed by neo-greenbackers has been debunked by two Austrian-oriented free market thinkers, historian Thomas de Lorenzo and economist Gary North. The power elite has never started a war, or not for the last 300 years or so, without controlling both sides of the conflict. That's what directed history tells us. Hitler, Napoleon, the Kaiser, in each case, the money power seemingly controlled and funded the enemy. Why on earth are we to believe that Lincoln, above all, was somehow immune to this formula? Most likely he was not. Now let me stop right there. Because what you have now is not a formula, but a dogma. In other words, if you assume the conspiracy view of history, if you assume the idea that there is an elite, that they always have their hands on both sides of the dialectic, then the assumption is that yes, Lincoln himself had to be a pawn in the hands of that money power. All right, and there is a certain argumented case, pardon me, a certain arguable case that Lincoln could be seen that way. Because let's examine what the thinking behind what the European money power at that time, largely represented by the Rothschild family, but others as well, were really attempting to do with the United States. The way they were looking at it, particularly the British Rothschilds, and this is a very important component of the story. The way they were looking at it was the United States was the up-and-coming power. Something had to be done to curtail the United States as a power. So the standard argument of conspiracy view of history and appealing to that European money power based in the city of London in Great Britain was that they split the United States over the issue of slavery, and the ultimate result was, again, controlling both sides. If the South was successful in sustaining the war and sustaining its independence, they had a split nation. In other words, they achieved one of their aims, which was to curtail the development of American power. If, on the other hand, the North won, then they would achieve another aim, and that is the growth of a large federal state in opposition to the individual liberties that were such a threat to that money power. All right, so you can argue the case that the Daily Bell is making. Now let me continue here. It really doesn't matter whether or not Lincoln was pro or anti-Greenback. First of all, Greenbackerism doesn't work in the long run. Governments always print too much money when they have the chance and thus debase the currency. Now let me stop right there. We have the assertion of another dogma with the use of the word always. You'll notice at this point in the article, there is no citation of support for the always argument. Now, it is true, and I've pointed this out before, that governments with a monopoly to print money, just like a private central bank with a monopoly to print money, will tend to debase the currency. And we're going to see later that the Daily Bell makes a bit of an argument against that case. But I don't think it is true that, particularly if you go way back in history, that this is always the case, that governments always debase the currency. That's why, and this is their conclusion, that's why fiat schemes eventually wither, just as the dollar reserve system is withering. It doesn't matter who does the printing. It's the monopoly that matters. Pardon me, and with that I agree. But now let's get to the conclusion. Let's get to the core of what they're talking about here. Because the core is, I think, another dogma. All right? I'm not opposed, as I've said many times, I'm not opposed to the idea of bullion-backed currencies, except the problem is we simply do not have enough bullion to back every form of monetary transaction. In other words, if you stop and consider all the virtual money transactions being done electronically that bypass the need for backing with bullion, you get the idea. There are different types of money in circulation, and at some point, yeah, I think there's a place for bullion. But to argue as a dogma that we're going to have to go back to a bullion-backed basis for currency, I think is stretching the point. And we're going to see why at the end of this news and views from the Nefarium. All right, here's the core of the Daily Bell's argument. We believe more in private money and competitive money systems, including private clearinghouses, fractional reserve, and anything else that someone wants to try. We believe within this context, silver and gold would find their place as historical bi-metallism always has. Greenbackers, on the other hand, believe that government itself, if properly run for the people, can issue fiat money and spend its way to prosperity. Now, that's an interesting juxtaposition because I'm certainly not opposed to bi-metallism. I'm certainly not opposed to fractional reserve banking, believe it or not. But I am opposed to the idea of private money because that's the system we have now. All right? What greenbackers are such a threat is to this dogma, to the Austrian dogma, is that they believe, and I'm certainly not a greenbacker either, because I believe if you want to have an open money system, all forms of money have to be debated and discussed openly. You can't dogmatically shut one out for the inclusion of another dogma. All right. In other words, I think we need to have a real discussion on the nature of finance and money in our contemporary culture. But private money is what we have now. We do not have, and have not had in this country since 1913, a real public money system, because the Federal Reserve has gradually taken public money out of circulation. And by public money, I meant U.S. silver certificates, gold certificates, and United States notes. These were three different types of currency that were publicly issued by the government directly, not by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has gradually taken all of those notes and bills out of circulation, even though they are still legal tender. All right, I used to have copies of silver certificates and United States notes. You can still spend them, but if you do, it'll go to the Federal Reserve Bank in your local district, and the bank will pull it out of circulation. It does not want public money in circulation. That's the problem that I've been having with the analysis of the Daily Bell. Now there's one more problem, and I'm going to link the article to the website version of this news and views from the Nefarium. Because you'll notice that in the Daily Bell, they're arguing for, quote, historical bimetallism. And again, I'm not opposed to the idea of silver and gold as a specie form of money, all right? The problem is as I'm sure many of you are aware, the gold bullion itself, number one, we don't really know how much there is because we have official statements, and yet we have all of that gold that was plundered by the Japanese during World War II from Asia during Operation Golden Lily. That amount of gold never entered the official statistics. We don't know how much there was. We do know that it was in the billions, if not trillions, of dollars. So there's a lot of unaccounted for gold out there. Let's imagine that the elites have their hands on all of it. What if they suddenly released or dumped all of that gold on the market? The value of gold would plummet vis-a-vis the value of money, all right? The problem number two is if you've been following the story of the bearer bonds, there are a lot of gold certificate-backed bearer bonds out there. I've argued the case that this represents, therefore, a legitimate form of bond, that there is some basis for all these alleged counterfeits. Now, I think I know what's going on. I'm going to actually be commenting on it in an upcoming book. But the other part of this story is, as I'm sure some of you are aware, is that there has been a lot of fake gold bars out there. There have been gold bars, the most recent story being in the United Kingdom, of a gold bar that showed up with tungsten rods inserted inside the gold bar. All right. This has happened over and over and over. The banks that were given all of this gold from Golden Lily during World War II appear now to be clipping, this is an old practice from the Middle Ages, appear to be clipping the specie in circulation. In other words, coins that were circulated, bullion coins, used to be clipped by counterfeiters and by mints and banks. They'd shave off a little bullion and collect all this bullion from the true official designated weight of the coin, all right? This appears to be what's going on now. The banks and bullion brokers are inserting tungsten rods in these bars, selling them at full value, and keeping an amount of bullion that is taken from those bars for the tungsten rods. So in other words, even the bullion, here's the problem for you bimetallists out there. Even the bullion, if you're going to back your currency, even that's been tampered with by these money elites. So we need to have a real serious discussion, folks, about the nature of finance. And I want to be talking in some coming news and views from the Nefarium about other ideas that the elites are putting out there right now that are really kind of comical, because it's the same old, same old that we've been commenting about all the way since Babylon's banksters. Anyway, those are my thoughts for the weeks, folks. I do want to thank everybody again for your prayers, your donations. I'm almost to the point. I should be another month finishing the sequel to Babylon's Banksters, and then I've got to start another book. So I appreciate everybody's prayers. I especially appreciate your donations, especially that one dear lady. You know who you are. And I'll see you on the flip side, everybody. Bye-bye, and God bless.